Now let's start with connecting those pages. And for that here, in this index.html template, we got this anchor tag, this more details button, which should lead to another page. But this link here, this ref attribute value, should of course not be hard-coded because the page we want to navigate to is different. After all, we are rendering 2 or more list items here, and every list item gets its own specific link that links to its own specific detail page. Now, of course, we can start with /meetups here because we do have 2 URLs, and the detail page also starts with meetups and then has this dynamic segment. So that's now the part which we also need to create dynamically here. And the great thing here is that we can also use interpolation here inside of attribute values. You can use interpolation anywhere on this HTML page, not just between tags, though that is one place where you will often use it. But you can also use it here in attribute value, and then here we could interpolate meetup item.slug. Because every meetup item we're looping through here will have such a slug, because my dummy data has this slug value, this slug key in the dictionary. And that should generate a proper link. If we save this, then here, if I click on more details in a first meetup, I'm taken to the detail page. And please note that in the URL up here, we have a-first-meetup. If I click on more details on the second meetup, I'm on the same detail page because we just have some dummy content there at the moment, but the URL indeed is a second meetup after /meetups. So this is working. But this approach has a small downside. It works, but you can improve it. Because at the moment, /meetups is hard-coded here. And that means that if we ever decide to change our URLs, that we, for example, want to have meetup instead of meetups here, then we also need to adjust all the links we have in our documents. And here that's just one link, but of course in bigger websites that could be many links distributed across many pages. And that's why Django has a utility tag which you can use in your templates to let Django automatically create the proper URLs for you, just as it automatically creates those static URLs. And that's the special URL tag. You can use it anywhere where you want to let Django infer a URL, and a good example, of course, is the value of such a ref attribute on a link. To use this tag, you use the opening and closing curly brace %sign notation, and then you type URL here. And unlike static, you don't need to load this. URL is available out of the box. Now, URL allows you to tell Django to automatically generate the absolute URL to a specific URL defined in your URLs.py file. And all Django needs for that is a unique identifier per path defined in URL patterns. And you can set such an identifier as a third argument here. Or to be precise, you can set a bunch of keyword arguments, and one of them is the name keyword argument, which allows you to assign a unique name to this path. And that name can then later be used, for example, with the URL tag in the template, to uniquely identify this path. And therefore, name, of course, should take a unique value here. And that could be all meetups here for the first path, for example. And for that detail page, the name could be meetup-detail. The name values are totally up to you, though. And now that these names are set up, we want to link at the detail page here. So we can take this meetup detail name here, and in index.html here, use that in quotes as a value after the URL. Now, meetup detail happens to be a path that wants a dynamic segment value though, because the URL that needs to be constructed by Django will have a dynamic segment, and therefore in such a case, when using the URL tag, you also need to let Django know which concrete value for this dynamic segment should be used in this case here, when you use the URL tag. And you can simply pass those dynamic segment values in order after this URL name here. So we have a white space and then the first, and in this case only, dynamic segment value which Django should inject. And here in this case, that would be meetup item.slug. Now in URLs py, I will revert this back to just meetups here again. And now if we save all files, you see, I can still click these links and I still see the output here as it should be in the URL bar. So we have the different slugs here. So that's all working. But now, indeed, those links here are inferred and generated by Django. And therefore, if I change the URL of this second URL path here to meetup instead of meetups, then if I save this and reload, I can still click that and you see it works, but the link here, the URL, is indeed meetup, not meetups. So that's now the benefit of using this URL tag. We don't have to update our URLs on the entire page if we change them. Instead, Django will always infer the correct URL for us.